Oh, how she spoke, laughed Nina Ilyinivna, but once again pushed her daughter-in-law did not dare. She is in control, and if she hadn't, then what? What would she have done? Hit her. Come on, come on, come on. Mommy. A frightened Sonika ran out of the room. She was holding a stuffed bunny in her hands and looked fearfully at her screaming grandmother. After the girl, her father staggered out into the corridor. He didn't seem to be in any hurry. He doesn't care about anything, Irina summarized to herself. What are you looking at? Indignantly exclaimed the woman and snatched from the clutches of her mother-in-law's forearm. The mother of your child is treated like cattle, and you stand there and remain silent. Calm your mother down now. The man sighed tiredly and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Nina Ilyinivna hummed and turned to her son. Valera, say a word. Calm down, Already my head is buzzing from your screams. As I do not come from work, then a new scandal, and every time you start it, you should be ashamed of yourself. Mom is a sick person, she has a weak heart, and you, every day, then an old man is being rude. Calm down, both of you, and go to your rooms. I've said it all. The woman choked on the air out of indignation. She caught the haughty, satisfied look of her mother-in-law. You'll know how to turn my son against me, whispered mother-in-law. Valerka is not like that. He is a smart man and does not hold on to the skirt. There are a lot of women in the world, but the mother is one for life. And with these words, Nina Ilyinivna went to her room. Sonika, hiding behind the closet, ran out to her mother. Irina hugged her daughter and began to calm her down. Although her eyes were wet, her lips were trembling, her hands too. At that moment, something broke in her soul. The hope that someday things would change was dead forever. Her husband had finally disappointed her. She pulled on her fall shoes and stepped out of the house for some air. Oh, you're going out to meet men, came a whisper from behind her. Cars whizzed by at breakneck speed. The wet sidewalk was covered with puddles. Irina leisurely weaved along Arbatskaya, looking under her feet. She was thinking. Thoughts of divorce first visited her a year ago, and all this time they occasionally flashed in her head like white noise. Now the woman was thinking about it seriously. Life with a vampire mother-in-law and a spineless husband was like hell. She was young, beautiful, and full of ambition. It was her husband who once long ago locked her in 4 walls with a child, saying, I am a man, a doer. I will be able to provide our family with everything we need. And you, Iroshka, leave work. Home will be engaged in the house. If she only knew how everything would turn out. Why don't you just give it all up? Get a job, put aside money for a rented house. Thankfully, there is education. Sonia is in kindergarten. And then upset the household by demanding a divorce? Take Sonia away. The mother-in-law should not be allowed to see her granddaughter. At least for the first time. If she wants to babysit Sonia, let her learn to respect her mother. And then we'll see how life turns out. God knows, and maybe a worthy man will meet. Irina involuntarily smiled. This arrangement suited her. He sounded like a wonderful revenge for all those years of humiliation and wasted nerves that she experienced in marriage with Valera and Nina Ilyinivna going to him in a set. Yes, she would divorce. She will divorce. She will finally take her life into her own hands. It's been 2 months. The woman went to the registry office and filed the divorce papers, and in the evening, shocked her husband and mother-in-law with this news. I'm taking Sonia if you're interested. Irina nonchalantly packed her things in a suitcase. She tried not to pay attention to the shocked looks of her husband and mother-in-law, holding back a smirk. How can it be, Iroshka? Take Sonia away. Where to? None of your business, Nina Ilyinivna. Ira, explain what's going on. What divorce? How did you come up with this nonsense? We were fine. Valera tried to grab the things out of his wife's hands, but she was adamant. She had already said everything she thought about them. Well, my mother and I overreacted a little, and I was a fool, or whatever they say. Yes, I admit it. She won't bother you anymore. Mother, tell me. I won't, Iroshka. Here's a cross for you. Nina Ilyinokna defiantly crossed herself. You stay here. Valerka's right, I overreacted. Well, forgive me, old girl, my head can't think straight anymore. Irina remained silent. She gave her husband and mother-in-law a skeptical, a little haughty look and rolled the suitcase out into the corridor. They followed her. Sanichka, run, let's get dressed. The blonde girl ran out of her room with a smile. Have you already packed your suitcase? Irina squatted down near Sonia. She shyly averted her gaze and nodded. God, where will you go? Nina Ilyinokna did not calm down. Tears came to her eyes. The child will be hungry, abandoned. The child will be with a loving mother, Nina Ilyinokna, Irina firmly stated. And not with, I would say, but I don't want to in front of Sanichka. The woman looked furtively at her husband. He still stood aloofly, leaning against the doorjamb, and folded his arms across his chest. He did nothing to stop his wife. Irina did not regret her decision to leave him. How she wanted to call him a spineless loser, but only in front of his daughter was uncomfortable. Irina opened the door. She told Sonia to wave goodbye to her father and grandmother, but she did not even look in their direction. Without the slightest hesitation, the woman left the hated apartment. The question of moving to her mother-in-law's house sounded like a thunderclap to Irina. Nina Ilyinokna suddenly began to complain about her health. She begged to move in with her. Who if not the children will give a glass of water in old age? Lamented the woman, grasping the sick heart, and she stubbornly waved away the nurse. Why is it that strangers will hang around my apartment? Maybe they'll take something else. No, my son, now people are like that. It's scary to go out in the street. People were kinder in our time. They didn't even know about locks. Nobody locked their houses. And now you're afraid to open the door. Only drug addicts are wandering around. The last thing Irina wanted was to live under the same roof as her mother-in-law. Relationships were not that strained. They were nothing. Already on the first day of their acquaintance, 8 years ago, Nina Ilyinokna made it clear who she is by nature. Cunning, power-hungry, she sought to control every step of her son, and now her daughter-in-law. The woman did not tolerate objections and did not accept the word no. And if she received a refusal in response to his unsolicited advice, then sorrowful brokenness exclaimed about the ingratitude of children. For 2 years, Irina kept at a distance, but at the same time desperately tried to establish relations with her mother-in-law to find an approach to her. However, she seemed to deliberately torment her daughter-in-law. At first, punishments pestered. That the wedding, as she wants to organize, or will manage the household, as she said. In Irochka, the borscht must be rich, thicker, and more nutritious. Valerka likes it that way. Oh, a man needs meat, not just chowder. If only you'd fed him raw beets, no brains, no reason. And this is on someone else's territory, as a guest. Her husband kept silent and ran away at every emerging conflict. And Irina could not stand it. One day she could not stand it. Politely thanked her mother-in-law for wise instructions, but firmly insisted that Nina Ilyinokna did not interfere in their family. Since then, the mother-in-law became angry. Iroshka, you must have gained weight, or what? Nina Ilyinokna laughed. No, my daughter, this will not do. You should lose weight. So many beautiful girls on the streets flaunt. They'll steal your Valerka, mark my word. Irina skeptically looked at her mother-in-law. An obese woman, no less than 100 kilograms, was eating the third eclair, sitting in her kitchen. The daughter-in-law had time to regret 100 times that led her in the door. Iroshka, you're completely crazy. A married woman, and dressed as if on the highway. Forgive me, God. What a neckline, all your soul inside out. Do you want a man's attention? And Valerkin's was not enough. Irina shuddered from the creaky voice that sounded behind her back. Like a mute fish, the woman opened her mouth, but could not find at least a couple of profane words. Her eyes stared angrily at her mother-in-law. such insolence she had never met before. And Nina Ilyinichna, pleased with the reaction of her daughter-in-law, defiantly tasked and shook her head, and then went to the kitchen, purposely loud grumbling under her nose. I told my son, "Look at her, come to your senses. After all, you can see, not a girl long ago. That's in our time. No connection before marriage was out of the question. It was a terrible sin. People were smarter, closer to God. And my father and I brought up our children that way. But Valerka had the misfortune to get involved with you." "Oh." Irina angrily hissed and threw her sweater out of her hands. It crumpled and landed on the sofa. The woman flew into the kitchen after the seemingly unperturbed mother-in-law. "Well, Nina Ilyinichna, this is too much. What right do you have to insult me and accuse me of such things? I am your son's wife and the mother of your granddaughter. Have some respect. You, Irochka, dishonored yourself," nodded mother-in-law, without raising her head. She was ashamed, but she didn't want to admit it, so she continued to bend her line. There was nothing to go out before the wedding and hang on to men. Irina suddenly laughed, and the mother-in-law finally raised her eyes and stared in surprise at her daughter-in-law. "And Oleska, your two girl married? And then Lechka gave birth 6 months later. Tell me too." Mother-in-law choked on air. Oleska, her daughter, did get married and pregnant. But Nina Ilyinichna tried to hide it from everyone. She was afraid of shame. So she ran around the guests at the wedding and wailed. Like, "Oh, how Lesia has gained weight. Oh, how she's grown." Not finding what to say, mother-in-law agitated and clucked like a hen. "You do not touch my Lesia. Don't touch her, I said. It's none of your business." "Oh, you'd better keep quiet, Nina Ilyinichna." Irina sighed and left the kitchen, buttoning her shirt, and after all this to live with her in the same apartment? However, her husband insisted on moving. For the 5th year, they lived on the territory of her mother-in-law, in a large 2-room apartment near the center of Moscow. This is where the pluses end. It was a real hell. She and Valerka moved in and did the repairs in 6 months. It was inconvenient, mother after all, and Nina Ilyinichna was always dissatisfied, grumbling. That's not right for her. That's not right for her. Even her husband couldn't stand it. He shouted so much that the neighbors heard. Irina kept quiet. Tried to live wisely, not to get involved in family conflicts, but her nerves soon gave out. One evening, Irina could not find her favorite shirt, silk, black, fitted with a beautiful V-neck, visually lengthening the neck. The one my mother-in-law hated. I asked my mother-in-law directly if Nina Ilyinichna had found it missing. Maybe it was in the laundry and she didn't notice. I threw away your rag. Her mother-in-law shocked her. I kept silent, but I couldn't stand it. I'm sorry, Irochka, but it's not appropriate to walk around in such debauchery. You should be ashamed of your husband. That's when Irina was carried away. Even the plates flew into the wall. And the mother-in-law immediately complained to her son. But this time, Irina was not going to bend. Also told her husband everything in the hope that he at least this time to intercede. But the husband habitually waved his hand and, referring to fatigue after work, fell on the couch. After the scandal, Nina Ilyinichna did not take it easy for 2 weeks. Threatened to throw unstable daughter-in-law out of the house. She called her scandalized and shouted that she had broken all her dishes. Neighbors every day gathered on the bench outside the building to listen to another story about the abnormal daughter-in-law. "Oh, my fool Valerka. Oh, a fool," she lamented, sitting with neighbors under the entranceway. Yes, so that the whole yard heard. "My daughter-in-law is completely crazy. At home commands, yells at me. She can raise her hand. And how she dresses. Her skirt is all over the place. Her breasts are out of place." I said, "Where are you going?" And she keeps snorting. "I'm taking Sonia to daycare. Stay out of it." Good God, how can you take your child to the daycare center like that? I'm lying here before I go to bed and I'm thinking, oh no, there's something wrong here. She's probably looking for men. She wants to steal someone else's daddy since she's going to kindergarten like that. I keep trying to talk sense into her. I'm trying to talk to her with a soul. She's like my daughter, but all to no avail. However, as soon as the neighbors parted, Nina Ilinikna sharply ceased to be a victim. One evening, she did not hesitate, grabbed her sister-in-law by the sleeve, and pushed her to the exit. "Get out of my apartment." Mother-in-law's eyes were like animal eyes. "Veller, calm down your mother," Irina shouted in despair. "Take this crazy woman away from me, while I keep myself in control."